Welcome to our return visit to idyllic Lowther Castle and Gardens in Cumbria. And this estate has been under the belt of the Earl of Lonsdale's family for 800 years. And when the Inland Revenue came knocking in the 1950s, the roof was removed to avoid paying taxes. The castle crumbled and was close to falling down. So in 2010, a scheme was hatched to save this sleeping beauty. The Lowther Charitable Trust raised £9 million and restoration began. Firstly, the castle was made safe, though it will always remain a ruin. The stables, however, had grander plans. Armies of stonemasons rebuilt turrets, repaired lime plaster ceilings, and polished the paving slabs. Now look at it. This glorious restoration has saved the grandest stable courtyard in the land. The gardens had also been completely neglected. 17th century records and more recent photos show they'd been some of the most ambitious money could buy. In the 1940s, the army poured concrete over the lawns to test a top-secret tank laser. And until a few years ago, several very large chicken broiler sheds created their own industrial ambience. I'm glad to say, though, the South Lawns today are looking splendid. It's the ideal backdrop to welcome Roadshow fans from Cumbria and beyond.
So I'm assuming it's a traditional ring that's come through the family, would that be right?
No. Unfortunately not. The story is that actually I found it when I was about 8 years old under a park bench.
Really?
Yeah.
What happened? Tell me all.
Well, we went to visit some of my parents' friends, and while they were sat chatting, watching the sunset, me and my brothers and sisters were all running around the car park, and it just so happened that I picked that up from underneath one of the benches.
What, it just glimmered?
No, I don't really remember, but then after that it lived in a cupboard at home, and when my parents were redoing their kitchen, it came back to light, and I claimed it as mine there and then.
First of all, let me tell you when I think it was made, around about 1925.
Okay.
The little white stones going around the big red stone in the middle are real diamonds. Okay. So you hadn't been told that. Is that the first time you've been told that those are diamonds?
No, but I was hoping they were.
Well, then your hopes have been achieved because they are diamonds.
Okay.
The white mount, platinum.
Okay.
The little stamp you saw inside it is platinum. So it all rests really on what the big red stone in the middle. Now, I've had a look at it with my lens, and I have to tell you that if it is what one would hope it would be, which is a very large Burmese ruby, then your casual find as a youngster playing around the park bench would be recognised to the tune of several hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Hundreds of thousands?
Yes. But there's one slight problem.
It's not.
It's not.
Oh.
I'm awfully sorry. If I let you down a bit there, I'll tell you what it is. It's a synthetic ruby.
Okay.
And this big, brash red colour is indicative of synthetic rubies. And in fact, they were made in quite large numbers in the 20s and 30s. So if it had been a real ruby, that would have been a very interesting find, to say the least.
Definitely.
It is still a diamond and synthetic ruby ring, and they make them in furnaces. I mean, they're quite common, actually. So from a ring that potentially was worth maybe as much as £250,000, we're still worth 400 to 500.
Okay. That's all right.
You're disappointed, aren't you?
No,
yes, you are.
Well, yeah,
you are.
Several 100,000 would have been nice,
yes.
But, a few hundred.
Not meant to be.
That's what I said. With 28, I think it's 28 diamonds around the outside, It's got to be worth something. But,
yes,
okay.
It is.
That's good, though.
So there you are.
It's nice to know, finally.
It is nice to know, but you are disappointed.
Yeah. Now I know that it could have been that, yeah.
This ACO was made specifically to teach kids how to drive, and it's just like a real car. It has forward and reverse, it's got complete steering, and at the back there's a 98cc two-stroke engine. So a fantastic original trainer for kids. How did you come by it?
My dad bought it between 63 and 65, somewhere in Cumbria. I asked my mum about it, and she said he was there and back in the day, so it must have been reasonably local to us. And he bought it for us 3 children to play with.
So you scooted around the garden?
We actually took it to Kirkbride Airfield, which was sort of 20 miles away on a trailer, and it was played with there.
And how old were you then?
I would be about 6, but I'm the youngest of 3 children, so my brother and sister got to play with it more than I did.
I think it went up to 8 miles an hour, didn't it?
Oh, yes,
it
it
used
was
to go.
great. Yeah, it's really good fun.
Although the ACCO Junior Trainer was launched in 1939, I noticed that the transfer at the side, it says by appointment to Her Majesty. So that dates it sort of post-1952-53. Maybe then they relaunched it in the early 50s. And what's nice about it is that it has a gear stick, forward, reverse, neutral. It has 2 pedals for the brake and the accelerator, and then down on the side it has the handbrake. One thing's missing though. Where are the seats?
The seats, sadly, the car was flooded when Cockermouth flooded in 2009, and we had 5 foot of water over it. So sadly the seats were washed out and washed away. But they were red leather, if I recall.
So anybody in the Cockermouth area who's come across 2 red leather seats...
I'd love to have them back.
Well, a lovely thing. I'm sure it was something that gave you and your brothers lots of enjoyment.
Yes.
And what's it worth today? Well, it's not in the greatest condition now.
No.
It's been under 5 foot of water. The pneumatic tyres need a bit of attention, but it could be restored. In its current condition, if it ever went to auction and you decided to sell it, I would see an estimate of between £1,500 and £2,000.
Right.
You brought in these 2 incredibly stylish poster designs. The bridge is by John Mace, and the British Spar is by Austin Cooper. Can you tell me a little bit about where they came from?
I bought the pictures in 1993 at an auction in London, and the paintings had been found in a man's house in Southgate in London, and they were nailed to the rafters as insulation.
Oh, goodness.
Hence, there's some holes in the John Mace one.
Now, we don't really advise on the Roadshow, of course, but you were drawn to them, and I can see the holes, obviously, where they've been nailed to the ceiling. They're very striking, stunning designs. Do you know much about them?
Well, I think they were for the London and North East Railway.
That's absolutely right. Both of these artists would have been commissioned to promote, literally get people on the railway tracks and go and have holidays and visit these beautiful spots in wonderful Britain. And the 2 views, do you know where the bridge is?
It's at Barnard Castle, which is in County Durham.
And what about the British Spar? Do we know where that is?
Harrogate.
Yes, that's
North
right.
Yorks, yeah.
So you've done quite a lot of research. And what about John Mace? Have we found anything about him?
I don't particularly know enough about John Mace, no.
I mean, he was a relatively unknown artist. He was a designer. He lived in London. He was an official war artist, 1918 to 1919, but not so much known about him as a designer, but much more known about Austin Cooper, who came from Canada, born in Manitoba in 1890 and died in 1964. And very interesting, these original designs that he made for his lithographs, they're not always as commercial as the prints. The prints, when they're in perfect condition, they have wonderful, vivid colours. They can make a lot of money. As you can imagine, in this day, these sorts of things look brilliant in restaurants, look great in terms of interior design. They're still fashionable and rather wonderful. Very good sizes too. So you were drawn to these pictures through the images, and did you get carried away when you were bidding? What did you pay for them?
I think it was about £400. It was something round about that. But it was in 1993, so I'm not 100%.
Look, they have been through the wars a little bit. I don't recommend nailing them to the ceiling at all. They've got a little bit damp and they've lost a little bit of paint, but they're still fantastic value. I mean, certainly, I think they're worth at least £1,000 to £1,500 each.
That's good. That's very good.
We have here the most exquisite manuscript, illustrated manuscript, illuminated manuscript of Rostand's famous book Cyrano de Bergerac, which is beautifully done. And I notice here from the colophon at the end that it was given to T.N. Marshall, mon ami en captivité, my friend in captivity, and it was from Ruhleben in Germany, December 1917. So this is First World War. Tell me about it.
Yes, my father, who is seated in the lower row on the extreme right here,
yes,
was on holiday in Germany in 1914 and spent the entire First World War in the Ruhleben civil prisoner camp just south of Berlin.
A concentration camp, sort of?
Well, it was a civil prisoners camp.
Yes.
They organized education, they had theatricals, which no doubt explains to an extent the production of this book.
And calligraphy classes, obviously. Theatricals, yes, but calligraphy, I mean, this is quite a high standard of calligraphy.
Oh, yes, very much so.
So he ended up in prison, you say, in Germany. How was that?
Well, at the beginning of the First World War, Allied subjects who were in Germany for whatever reason were rounded up.
That was the same in England, too, for the Germans.
Same in England for the Germans.
And he was there for the entire war?
Yes.
Do we know who actually did this? This is presumably a Frenchman who did this.
I would assume so, but I'm sure my father knew, but I don't.
Looking through this, the calligraphy I find very exciting, but the little watercolours here and little remarks on this S here with the falcon, I suppose it is, on the edge of it, is beautiful. It's in the medieval sort of style.
Well, yes, we've always treasured this book.
Now tell me about the binding.
We understand that the binding is actually made of rat skin leather because rats were the only things they could catch to tan and make the leather out of.
Julia, this is alarming. I don't think I've ever had a piece of rat skin. It must have been an awfully big rat. I mean, these quite sizable, these boards, aren't they?
Well, I mean, if you think the rat maybe was that long...
Was he that wide? Was he that wide?
Well, it would stretch when you tan it, wouldn't it?
So, let me value it. I'm going to say £5,000. It's a fine piece.
Oh, thank you very much.
So, where did they come from?
I've been told that my grandmother bought them when the castle was, when everything was sold in the castle.
Okay, so that big sale, that big auction.
Yeah.
I feel really awful because I'm not one to really, you know, throw accusations against your relatives.
My gran wouldn't lie.
Nobody's gran lies. These are not the quality for me of Lowther Castle.
No.
It's not. I mean, these are early 20th century Japanese export ware vases.
Yeah, well, I thought there would be export jobs.
Yeah. They were made not in their hundreds, not in their thousands, but in their potentially hundreds of thousands, and were exported all over the world, into Europe, into North America, and I just personally can't imagine that a pair of these would have ended up in a wealthy estate like Lowther. So, shall we just say maybe that it would be a shame to, you know, damage what's been a well-held tale for a few years?
Yes.
Yes.
We will, right, all
because let's just say, big question marks, your Lowther Castle vases today are worth about 20 quid.
Oh, each. Have I stood it? Yeah, I'm going to say each, yeah.
No,
Have
not
I
each.
Stood
not
it
each.
You for that. I thought I was going to be the one that said, oh my God.
Basically, I've just called your grandmother a liar and your vases are nothing.
That's fine, I can cope with that.
That's all right.
With that.
This took a long time to set up, not because it's particularly complicated, but because all the guys in the production team were saying, oh, I had one of those, oh, mine was missing this, mine was missing that. So, you know, you have got a team of fans out there behind the cameras who just love these. So we're looking at a great collection of Action Man.
This is part of it, yeah. This is part of it.
He says
I couldn't bring it all.
What got you started?
We had them as kids. I've got 3 brothers, and we all had Action Men. This is what we played with when we were kids, you know, and our friends, we all played with this. And I'd totally forgotten about them, and then I'm a builder, and clearing out an old attic, I found one, and that was it. When I picked it up and held it in my hand, that was it. I was that big again.
It all came flooding back to you.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
Let's just rewind and talk about the start of Action Man, because in '64, Hasbro created and launched G.I. Joe, which was an action figure, and in '66, Palitoy got the license from Hasbro to create Action Man, and very clever name. You know, G.I. Joe really focused it almost entirely into the military, whereas Action Man, he could be anything. He could be a soldier, he could be an adventurer, he could be a spaceman, he could be anything. So that was pretty clever. And of course, you are not allowed to call these dolls, are you?
No, you can't say the D word. No, they're figures.
They're figures, action figures.
Yes.
So they started in '66, and the classic Action Man figure from '66, we all know it, painted hair, the scar on his cheekbone.
The scar was a trademark to stop people copying.
Very clever. And then later on, as the years unfolded, he got fuzzy hair. They had posable hands, and of course the great thing is that they came with all these accessories.
Oh yeah.
I think this was 1976, wasn't it, when Eagle Eyes came in. I'm going to pick up Eagle Eyes because I love this toy. Because he does exactly what you expect him to do. He looks, he can look round corners. So that was a great invention. And I guess if you had an Eagle Eyes, you kind of weren't happy to have one without.
When you mention Action Man, everyone usually says, oh, Eagle Eyes, straight away.
Exactly, it became a sort of synonymous with it. Now, how were they selling Palitoy? Well, they were in every high street, but of course they would also go to toy shows. And I think what we've got here, this great heavy-duty, reinforced cornered wooden box, is exactly what somebody from Palitoy would have taken to a toy show to show the product. Here you've got these early painted-headed Action Men in here, all slotted into their right places. I only know of one other. Now, when it comes to valuing Action Men, condition, of course, is of paramount.
Condition is everything, yeah.
Now you can pick up a average Action Man figure for 30, 40 pounds.
Yeah.
The better ones, particularly if they're in their boxes, we're talking about 150-ish.
Yes.
And then you get on to the different sort of strata. We've got a couple here. One is this figure. Where did you get it from?
I saw that in a box at a toy fair. I knew what it was as soon as I saw it, but the dealer didn't.
And what's its title?
Space Explorer.
And did it have all its bits with it?
No, I had to find
the backpack, and the flight line, and also the pickup arm. I had to find those 3 things to complete it.
What did you pay for it?
I paid £10.
Very good.
I paid £10.
And now, if you wanted to replace it, you'd be paying how much?
You'd be looking at between £250 and £300 for that.
Amazing.
A collector would pay that.
Yeah. The case here, slightly difficult to value this because they don't appear at auction. There's only another one known. There are only 2 of them, which doesn't necessarily make them that desirable. But I think we're talking about certainly not less than 500 for that.
Great.
It is a fabulous field of collecting. And it's great to have your enthusiasm, and thanks for sharing it with us today.
Thank you very much.
So you've brought in these urns today. They're Victorian, made of cast iron. But why have you brought them here?
My father-in-law bought them in 1947 from the sale at Lowther Castle, and we've had them ever since, and we've really enjoyed them. We fill them with flowers every year.
Yes, there was a huge sale in 1947. The family had actually moved out of Lowther Castle in 1935, and then during the war it was requisitioned. And I suppose by 1947 they realised that they weren't going to ever live in it again. And so there was a huge sale, an auction of the entire contents, and your father-in-law was somebody who bought some of the items.
Yes, and he bought all kinds of things, including these 4 urns and tables and various bits and pieces that we still have. Some have gone elsewhere, some have been divided amongst the family.
Well, there must have been many families in the area who attended the auction, and it's interesting to see these back here today. Now, you've probably heard of something called provenance, which is sort of proof, if you like, that something actually did, belong to a place.
Yes.
And you might be wondering why we've put these urns in this particular position today.
Yes, I thought it was a long way to walk to find it.
Well, the reason being, I've got here a family photograph album for Lowther Castle, and there's a photograph here I think you'd be interested to see.
Oh, my word. And those are the urns there, and the little ones. How interesting is that?
So here are the urns that your father-in-law bought in their original position, and this building here, which is no more, was the old conservatory.
Gosh.
Do they look familiar?
Oh, they certainly do.
Is it going to give you an idea of how to plant them up next summer?
Yes. Yes. That's lovely, isn't it? My word. Very interesting.
Well, as far as the value goes for the 4 of them, they're worth as Victorian cast iron garden urns around sort of £800 or £1,000.
Really?
But with photographic evidence like this, I think it's such a lovely provenance, and it's so nice to see them here today. I guess these would be worth around £1,500.
Really? Each?
No. For the 4.
Altogether?
But can I ask you, what did your father-in-law pay for them? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Does anybody know who this gentleman is? No, it's not Nelson, but thank you. Do you know who he...
No, I thought he was a sailor.
You're absolutely right. He's one of our greatest naval heroes. He's not Nelson. He's Admiral Lord Rodney. Now, Rodney, he famously defeated the French. That was to protect Jamaica in 1782. And he was very much celebrated. He tried to get into politics, he got into terrible trouble, ran up huge debts and had to leave the country.
Oh dear.
He died in 1792, and this mug here commemorates him.
My goodness.
So how does he get to you?
Well, I don't know. He's been in my father's family well, I presume for at least 100 years, but it's just been hidden away in a cupboard. And I don't know anything about the history of where he's come from, but that's why I brought him today, to try and find out a bit more about him.
He dates from about 1790. It's a type of pottery called Prattware, where the colours are underneath the glaze, and it's why they don't flake off, as has happened so often with Staffordshire pottery. You'll see on his forehead the flag here, which I think is the affirmative. It basically means yes. It's a positive naval flag, and it's just rather a wonderful thing to be celebrated in pottery like this.
And would it have been meant to drink out of? Was it for practical purposes made, or was it decorative?
I think probably decorative, but there's no reason you couldn't drink out of it either.
No. Probably just for the mantelpiece.
Yeah, but it's made in Staffordshire, so it's an English product celebrating an English hero. The English market for pottery at the moment isn't particularly strong, but in auction today, he'd be in the region of £2,000.
Wow. Goodness me. I had no idea. No idea at all.
The exciting thing about this clock, for me, is that we've never had a double-sided pendulum clock on the Antiques Roadshow ever.
Right.
What do you know about it?
Absolutely nothing. It's been hanging on a wall in the house for maybe 60, 70 years. Don't know where it came from. Don't know anything about it at all.
The fascinating thing about it is that the clock itself is suspended from the wall, and it's not apparent immediately how that works. We have here the suspension block, as we would call it technically, and the block is fixed to the wall above the pendulum. The block sits against the wall, and this piece at the top slots through here so that it is actually suspended from the wall. If I give that back to you.
Thank you.
And then that slots onto there and covers up the suspension piece. So in effect, the pendulum is suspended in midair from that block, neatly covered up, and it looks rather beautiful. But what happens, as you know, is that when it's sitting against the wall, the pendulum swings very, very, very gently like that. But I think it's important for viewers and for yourself to know that originally, in my opinion, this clock would have sat against the mirrored wall, because, and I'm going to do this now, on the other side, it's also skeletonized.
I wondered what the point was of having the glass in the
back. And if you have a mirror behind it,
of course,
pazzow, it comes to life.
That's right.
And everybody understands what's going on. It's a shame in a way, because it's no longer a mystery.
That's right.
I'm going to open it up to see the dial. And on the silver plaque here, we can see it says oscillating regulator, Thomas Middlemas, Edinburgh. And he was officially an importer of foreign clocks. It's made around 1870. It's a skeletonized dial, so it's got the numbers pierced out, made of brass, they've been silvered. And the movement itself has been pierced out with these fleur-de-lis decoration. Now the movement works from winding this steel square here, and that provides the power source, okay? So it's an oscillating, skeletonized pendulum wall clock. At auction, it's got to be worth between 10 and £15,000.
Oh, right, wow.
So you're not going to buy a Ferrari, are you?
You're not going to buy a Ferrari.
So World War II, scarves like this had become not so much a fashion accessory, but actually a practical necessity for some of the people working in munitions factories. How did you get these?
They were my mother's. She must have accumulated them during the war, but how she got them, I don't know.
Because they're very patriotic, aren't they? Do you think your mum was a true patriot?
Oh, yes, definitely.
Definitely. Because it's got all this fantastic go to save for victory, keep it dark, and all these. And of course, they're rayon. And that rayon was the magic fabric of the 1930s because it was sort of unpatriotic to wear silk. Silk was needed elsewhere. So rayon was the great,
that.
great replacement. And these are fabulous. And of course, if you remember pictures of the ladies with their head scarves tied up so that their hair didn't get any of the machinery. And it became such a fashion statement. And of course, with the patriotic side to it as well. So what did your mum tell you about these days?
I just know she worked in high duties as a draftswoman during the war.
So, I mean, they're so amazingly patriotic. You can imagine her wearing them with pride.
Yes.
And to support the troops and the war effort.
Very much so, yes.
In terms of value, these fabulous scarves are not worth a tremendous amount of money. I mean, I think this one with the RAF and this one, the paratroops, I would value it at sort of £30 to £50. The wall is a really iconic scarf, and I could easily see that fetch £100 to £150.
Really?
So it's a beautiful piece of war memorabilia.
Yeah.